Hollywood once ran wild before the censors showed up. In the early 1930s, films pushed limits with stories so bold, they sent police straight into theaters to shut them down. Can you imagine buying a ticket for a Barbara Stanwyck drama and suddenly seeing the show rated? These movies weren't just daring, they rattled an entire industry. Which ones went so far they sparked bans and rewrites that still echo through film history? Let's find out. Babyface 1933. Few films rattled Hollywood's guardians of morality like Babyface. Barbara Stanwyck plays Lily Powers, a young woman from a grim background who refuses to stay stuck in the gutter. Using her wit and charm, she climbs her way up the social ladder, leaving a trail of stunned men and furious bosses behind her. It's the kind of rags-to-riches story you'd expect to be celebrated, but here was the problem. The way she rose was too direct, too unsettling, and way too honest for its time. When Babyface first hit screens, it wasn't just controversial, it was explosive. Review boards across the country railed against it. Some demanded entire reels be cut out, softening Lily's bold choices into something more palatable. In Pennsylvania, officials actually raided theaters to seize prints, declaring the film immoral. The studio scrambled, rushing out a tamer edit where Lily's ambition looked less shocking and her ending less triumphant. Ironically, the heavy edits only made audiences more curious. Word spread quickly that the censored version was weak compared to the original Firestorm. Collectors whispered about the uncut reels, and for decades, the real version was nearly impossible to see. Only in the 2000s did Warner Bros. Restore the film, proving how much sharper and smarter the original story really was. What makes Babyface unforgettable isn't just Barbara Stanwyck's ferocious performance. It's the way the movie exposed a deep truth. Audiences wanted grit, but the system wasn't ready to admit it. The raids and bans didn't bury the film, they immortalized it. Today, it stands as one of the clearest examples of why the pre-code era mattered. Red-Headed Woman 1932. If Babyface shocked censors, Red-Headed Woman downright taunted them. Jean Harlow, with her sharp smile and fiery hair, plays Lil Andrews, a secretary who decides she's tired of scraping by. Instead of waiting for life to hand her opportunities, she storms into the world of wealth and takes it for herself. Audiences of 1932 had seen social climbers before, but never one as unapologetic or as funny as Harlow's Lil. The film caused a ruckus from the start. In state after state, censor boards tried hacking away at dialogue and entire scenes. They claimed Lil was too forward, that she made a mockery of traditional values. Cities like Memphis outright banned the movie, while other towns demanded rewrites before it could be screened. Theater owners who dared to run the uncut version risked raids and fines. So why was Red-Headed Woman such a lightning rod? Part of it was Jean Harlow herself. She wasn't just acting, she radiated a kind of confidence that audiences couldn't ignore. Every smirk, every comeback, every moment she seized control on screen felt electric. To some, it was liberating. To others, it was terrifying. Critics at the time were split. Some dismissed the movie as a cheap provocation, while others praised it for giving Harlow a role that matched her talent. Over time, the second group was proven right. Today, the movie is remembered not as an embarrassment, but as a landmark. Proof that pre-code cinema wasn't afraid to hold up a mirror and show society's hypocrisies with a laugh. By the time the Hays Code clamped down in 1934, a character like Lil Andrews would have been impossible. That's what makes Red-Headed Woman so fascinating now. It's not just entertainment, it's a snapshot of the brief wild window when Hollywood dared to let a woman lead with wit, fire, and absolutely no apologies. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Few films created panic among theater owners like The Story of Temple Drake, based on William Faulkner's controversial novel Sanctuary. It follows Temple, a Southern debutante whose privileged life takes a grim turn when she's caught up in a world of crime and ruin. What shocked audiences wasn't just the subject matter. It was the blunt way the film dared to show the dangers faced by a supposedly good woman once she strayed from the safety of her social class. Censors pounced the moment the film hit screens. In some towns, police literally barged into theaters mid-show, pulling the reels and declaring the story too corrupting to be seen. Others banned it outright, citing its vulgar content. The movie was even blamed for encouraging crime, as if showing hardship on screen might somehow cause it in real life. Paramount, nervous about the growing outcry, quickly buried the picture once the Hays Code began to tighten its grip. For decades, The Story of Temple Drake was nearly impossible to watch. It became one of those whispered about titles, the kind of movie scholars referenced but few had actually seen. When it finally resurfaced, critics were startled to realize just how modern it felt. Temple isn't some passive victim. She's complicated, flawed, and her choices resonate even today. The raids and bans might have damaged the film's box office, but in the long run, they made it legendary. Few pre-code movies demonstrate as clearly how willing Hollywood once was to tread into dangerous territory. Watching Temple Drake now is like peering into a hidden history, one the industry tried to erase but couldn't. Scarface, 1932. Before Al Pacino ever shouted, "Say hello to my little friend," Howard Hawks' Scarface already had theaters trembling. Starring Paul Mooney as Tony Camonte, this gangster saga charted the rise and fall of a ruthless mob boss. What made it especially shocking was how bluntly it mirrored real-life crime figures like Al Capone, who reportedly saw the movie himself and laughed at its close resemblance to his own empire. From the start, Scarface was a lightning rod. City boards from Chicago to New York bristled at the way the film seemed to glamorize criminals. Some states refused to license it altogether, while others demanded that the ending be rewritten to make sure Tony's downfall looked more like a warning than a thrill ride. In certain theaters, screenings were interrupted by officials who claimed the picture promoted violence. Yet for all the panic, audiences loved it. The action was intense, the pacing relentless, and Paul Mooney's performance was magnetic. Instead of shrinking from the brutality of organized crime, the film leaned into it, presenting gangland as both horrifying and weirdly fascinating. That tension between attraction and repulsion was exactly what censors couldn't stand. The bans and raids didn't stop Scarface from carving its place into film history. In fact, they made it more notorious, turning it into the ultimate forbidden fruit. Hawks's direction and Howard Hughes's fearless production created a movie that was bigger than the controversy. Nearly a century later, its influence is still felt in every crime epic that followed. Hell's Angels, 1930. Howard Hughes wasn't just a filmmaker, he was a showman who loved making headlines. With Hell's Angels, his obsession with aviation met Hollywood spectacle. This World War I drama featured breathtaking aerial battle sequences shot with real planes and real stunt pilots, resulting in some of the most jaw-dropping footage of its era. But it wasn't the airplanes that got Hughes in trouble, it was the story wrapped around them. At the center was Jean Harlow, delivering one of her breakout performances. She wasn't the damsel audiences expected. Instead, she played a woman whose choices shocked conservative viewers. Lines that seemed cheeky to some were declared offensive by others. In England, officials banned the movie outright, declaring it unfit for public exhibition. Back in the US, several states tried to hack it apart before allowing screenings. Then there were the raids. In cities like Chicago, screenings were disrupted by moral watchdogs claiming the film's content lowered standards. Never mind the extraordinary aviation sequences, what got people stirred up was Harlow's daring presence and Hugh's refusal to tone her down. Ironically, all the uproar only added to the film's mystique. Audiences flocked to see what the fuss was about, and the movie became one of the biggest hits of its day. The raids failed, but the legacy stuck. Hell's Angels proved that spectacle mixed with audacity could shake both censors and crowds. Hughes wanted to create noise around his film, and thanks to the bans, he got more publicity than money could ever buy. Night Nurse, 1931. When Barbara Stanwyck shows up in Night Nurse, you know things won't stay quiet for long. Here she plays Laura Hart, a trainee nurse who quickly realizes her hospital isn't just about saving lives, it's a battleground of corruption and danger. Alongside her friend, played by Joan Blondell, she stumbles into a plot involving wealthy parents more interested in parties than their children's well-being. The shocker? The children's guardian, played by a young Clark Gable, isn't protecting them. He's threatening them. Censors couldn't believe what they were seeing. A film that showed neglect of children, hospital corruption, and blunt dialogue between women. To many, it crossed every line. In New York, theater raids pulled reels mid-show, declaring the material unfit. Some cities insisted entire sequences be trimmed before granting a license. The idea of a nurse uncovering threats against children hit too close to home for audiences who were used to squeaky clean portrayals of healthcare. What makes Night Nurse so gripping is its mix of grit and humor. Stanwyck and Blondell trade snappy lines, standing up for themselves in a way that felt ahead of its time. And then there's Clark Gable, not yet the suave leading man of Gone with the Wind, but a chilling heavy, whose presence looms over the story. The film shocked audiences by showing Gable as a man who could terrify without ever raising his voice. In the end, the raids and bans couldn't erase Night Nurse. If anything, they amplified its reputation. Today, it's remembered not just as a pre-code curiosity, but as a gutsy, fast-paced drama that dared to take on themes Hollywood usually swept under the rug. It proved that even in 1931, audiences wanted more than sanitized fantasies. They wanted stories that looked the darker side of life right in the eye. The Public Enemy, 1931. Gangster films may be a dime a dozen today, but in 1931, The Public Enemy felt like a revolution. James Cagney's breakout performance as Tom Powers turned him into a star overnight. From the infamous grapefruit to the face breakfast scene to the brutal ending, the movie gave Depression-era audiences a story that felt alarmingly real. It wasn't just crime on screen, it was a mirror of what people were reading about daily in the papers. That realism is exactly what got it into trouble. In Chicago, theaters were raided mid-screening, police storming in to confiscate reels they claimed glorified gangland. Other cities insisted on disclaimers, forcing Warner Bros. To add moralizing text at the beginning. Some states refused to show it at all, arguing it encouraged young men to copy Tom Powers' swagger. But let's be honest, none of the bans worked. Audiences adored it. Cagney's performance wasn't just entertaining, it was electric. His fast-talking style, his sudden bursts of violence, his complete command of every scene, it felt dangerous, and viewers couldn't look away. Critics may have wrung their hands, but Word of mouth packed theaters wherever the film was allowed to play. The irony is that the very things censors hated are what made the Public Enemy immortal. Without its raw edges, it wouldn't have stood apart from countless imitators. Instead, the raids turned it into forbidden fruit, making audiences even hungrier to see it. Today, it stands as one of the defining pre-code movies, not just for its legacy in gangster cinema, but for proving that sometimes the more you try to hide a film, the more powerful it becomes. 3 on a Match 1932. Warner Bros. Had a knack for stirring trouble in the early 30s, and 3 on a Match was one of their boldest gambles. Starring Joan Blondell, Bette Davis, and Anne Dvorak, it follows 3 women whose lives spin in radically different directions after they reconnect. What starts as a simple friendship story quickly dives into darker territory: broken marriages, crime entanglements, and even child endangerment. The mix of glamour and grit caught censors completely off guard. Scenes involving Dvorak's character spiraling into chaos were flagged as too corrupting, and some states banned the film altogether. In a few cities, screenings were raided by officials who accused the movie of promoting immoral conduct. Theater owners who resisted were slapped with fines, creating a chilling effect across smaller markets. What makes 3 on a Match fascinating isn't just the controversy. It's the way the film captures the restless spirit of the early 30s. Blondell brings humor, Davis delivers subtle strength, and Dvorak, in a performance that stunned audiences, plays her downfall with raw intensity. At a brisk 63 minutes, the movie doesn't waste a second, packing in enough drama for a film twice its length. The result was a picture that rattled nerves and won admiration in equal measure. Critics later praised it for its sharp storytelling, but at the time, the raids and bans only made it seem more dangerous. Like so many pre-code films, its reputation outlived the panic. Watching it now, you can see why censors were nervous. The movie dares to suggest that life's choices are messy, that consequences don't always line up neatly, and that sometimes society's rules can't save you. Freaks, 1932. Todd Browning's Freaks wasn't just controversial, it was terrifying to censors. Set in a circus sideshow, the film cast real performers with physical differences, something unheard of in Hollywood at the time. Browning wanted to tell a story about community and loyalty, showing the so-called freaks as sympathetic and the so-called normal characters as the true villains. Audiences, however, weren't ready for such a blunt reversal. The backlash was immediate. Preview screenings in California left viewers fainting and demanding refunds. MGM rushed to cut nearly 30 minutes, trying to soften the shock. Even then, boards in Britain, Canada, and several U.S. states banned it outright. In Atlanta, police raided theaters, claiming the film was indecent and exploitative. For decades afterward, Freaks was a hidden picture, more talked about than seen. But time has a way of changing perspective. What censors saw as offensive, modern critics view as groundbreaking. The famous final sequence, where the sideshow performers crawl through the mud in a storm to confront their enemy, is both haunting and strangely empowering. Browning's daring decision to center people Hollywood usually ignored turned into a long-term legacy he likely never imagined. The bands might have buried Freaks in 1932, but its legend only grew. Rediscovered in the 1960s, it became a cult classic, celebrated for its raw honesty and strange poetry. What was once labeled too horrifying now stands as one of the bravest pre-code films ever made. Convention City, 1933. If you've ever heard the phrase lost film, chances are Convention City came up. This Warner Brothers comedy about a wild business convention was so notorious that the studio not only pulled it, it reportedly destroyed all known prints. Why? Because the movie's reputation was that of pure chaos, filled with innuendo, drinking, and behavior that made watchdogs foam at the mouth. At the time, it was a smash with audiences. Starring Joan Blondell and Guy Kibbe, it showcased fast-talking characters cutting loose at an out-of-town gathering. The jokes were sharp, the tone brash, and the energy relentless. But as censorship boards began cracking down, Convention City was singled out as Exhibit A for everything wrong with Hollywood. Some theaters faced raids for showing it. Others refused bookings entirely, scared of drawing fines. The result? By 1934, Warner Brothers decided the movie was too hot to handle. When the stricter code took effect, executives quietly withdrew it from circulation. Over time, it simply vanished. Today, only stills, posters, and script fragments remain, leaving historians to piece together what made it so dangerous. That mystery is part of its allure. Convention City may be lost, but its legend proves just how far studios were willing to go to protect themselves once the crackdown began. The film's disappearance is a reminder that censorship doesn't just silence, it can erase. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. H.G. Wells's novel The Island of Dr. Moreau was already unsettling, but Island of Lost Souls pushed it into nightmare territory. Charles Laughton stars as Dr. Moreau, a scientist on a remote island who experiments on animals to turn them into something disturbingly human. The film's eerie atmosphere, grotesque makeup, and chilling performances made it unlike anything audiences had ever seen. The reaction? Pandemonium? British censors banned it completely, calling it blasphemous and grotesque. In the U.S., several states refused to license it, claiming it was too horrifying for the public. Police raids on theaters showing unapproved prints were reported in the Midwest. For years, it remained one of the hardest pre-code films to find. Yet for those who did see it, the impact was unforgettable. Laughton's Moreau, with his sinister smile and casual cruelty, remains one of horror's most disturbing villains. The infamous chant of the island's creations, "Are we not men?" echoed through film history, later inspiring rock bands and countless homages. Though banned for decades in the UK, the movie eventually returned, its reputation stronger than ever. Today, it's hailed as a horror classic, proving that sometimes the most controversial films are also the ones that endure the longest. The Divorcee, 1930. Norma Shearer shocked critics and audiences with The Divorcee, a film that tackled marriage and infidelity in a way no Hollywood movie had dared. She plays Jerry, a woman who refuses to quietly endure her husband's betrayal. Instead, she makes bold choices of her own, demanding equality in a world that expects silence from wives. For 1930, this was dynamite. Censors fumed at the idea of a woman openly challenging marital norms. Some states cut entire scenes, while in conservative towns, police raided theaters for daring to show it. Still, the controversy only fueled ticket sales, and Shearer's performance was so acclaimed that she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. What made The Divorcee so radical wasn't just its story, it was its unapologetic honesty. Instead of punishing Jerry for stepping outside traditional boundaries, the film gives her a voice and a sense of agency rarely seen on screen at the time. Today, it stands as one of the defining pre-code dramas, both a crowd pleaser and a rallying cry. The bans and raids may have tried to silence it, but Shearer's daring turn made sure it survived. Call Her Savage, 1932. Clara Bow, the original It Girl, made her last major screen appearance in Call Her Savage, and she went out with a bang. Playing NASA Springer, a headstrong socialite who barrels through life making bold and reckless choices, Bow lit up the screen with raw energy. The film was stuffed with material censors despised. Bar fights, reckless relationships, and plenty of behavior that shocked audiences of the time. Several states banned it outright. In places where it did play, screenings were sometimes interrupted by police, claiming the movie was corrupting to young viewers. Critics were divided, with some calling it sensationalist trash, and others praising Bow for one of her most daring roles. The backlash, however, couldn't erase its popularity. Audiences flocked to see Bow, who proved she still had magnetic star power. Unfortunately, the stress of public life soon caught up with her, and she retired not long after. That makes Call Her Savage not just controversial history, but a poignant farewell from one of cinema's brightest early stars. Before Hollywood tightened the leash, movies ran wild, bold, daring, and unafraid to rattle the system. These 13 films weren't just stories on a screen. They were sparks that set off raids, bans, and decades of debate. And yet, most of them survived, stronger than ever. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love uncovering hidden film history, hit like and subscribe. After all, this is just the beginning of the stories Hollywood tried to bury.